Today is going to be a live sketch with me or paint with me format as I paint the view outside of my bedroom window in 3 different mediums. The actual video format itself is inspired by Minnie Small, whose long-form videos I absolutely love and have loved since she came out with them. They're about like 1 to 1.5 hours long, and they're just really nice to paint along with. So in hopes of the same, I hope you'll enjoy this video while making your own artwork. I'll be using 3 mediums, the first of which you see me doing now, which is watercolor. The second will be pen and also watercolor. And the third is purely gouache. The view I'll be referring to is the view outside of my window, which gets really good shadows in the morning. After around 7:30 a.m, most of the area is lit up, and I really wanted to capture the metro station, which is outside of our place, and kind of also get the shadow and light area above it. This was actually quite a complex scene to paint and draw, as I swiftly found out when I started working, and I think that's why I wanted to title this video Failing Forward, which is a concept introduced to me first by Tiffany Mang, who I absolutely love, and she was talking about it in this podcast episode that she did for the Tenet podcast, which you should definitely check out. I mean, it's like 2.5 hours long, but it's so good. I mean, it's great if you're working, just to keep in the background. I learned so much from Tiffany in this episode. On Googling the phrase failing forward, I found out it's actually a book written by John C. Maxwell. I'll get onto this a bit more later, but if you want to read some more about it, I have put a link in the description below. Also, my setup is kind of shaky because I was painting on my lap, so it was kind of hard to film. So please excuse any shakiness or kind of changes in the angles or anything like that. I actually first started the first sketch with watercolor because I was so inspired by Marco Bucci's watercolor videos. I do a lot of urban sketching. I mean, I've done it since about 2018, so I'm kind of comfortable with it. And the reason I love it so much is because it's just so easy. Like, I just have a sketchbook or even some paper and a pen, and that's it. Like, I don't need to fuss around with water and paint and all that kind of stuff. And I'm the kind of person who just likes to be really simple and get things done really quickly. So urban sketching really helped contribute, I suppose, towards that aim or intention of mine, whereas painting didn't. But since I watched Marco's videos on watercolor sketching, I really wanted to do the same, even though I don't actually do it. And to be honest, it kind of showed my lack of experience. Yeah, I really struggled with all of the pieces, but particularly the painting ones, the gouache and watercolor, mainly because I put down too much water, so everything bled into each other, which is okay, like it's an okay look, but it took a super long time to dry, so I couldn't work as fast as I wanted to. And especially if you're on location, you want things to dry super fast so that you can work fast. I think, you know, when you're using a lot of water with watercolor, it creates a nice background as long as you put the right colors down, but then you need it to dry so that you can work on top of it, which unfortunately, because I put down so much water, it wasn't able to dry in time. I really love Marco's videos, and I feel like his kinds of videos, or just any art tutorials in general, you need to watch more than once in order to understand. I mean, I remember I started watching him a couple of years ago, and I've watched like all his 10 minutes to painting videos, which are really good, 10 minutes to better painting videos, which are great. But now I've started rewatching them, which is great because I have a bit more knowledge about art and kind of color and all that kind of stuff. So it's just really nice to be able to kind of add to my visual vocabulary and also to my knowledge, my art knowledge, in a different way. Because I remember when I first watched the videos, I didn't really I kind of just watched them for the sake of watching them. I didn't really, I suppose, understand them, or I didn't apply them in my work. But now I'm just like, oh yeah, this concept relates to this thing that I learned a few months ago, and this thing relates to this thing. And it's just really nice when you're able to kind of exponentially build up on your knowledge base like that. So anyway, Marco paints digitally. He's, I suppose, a concept or background artist, I'm not too sure, but he also shows his watercolor work, and he really encourages digital artists in particular to paint from life, because it's just a completely different experience. And I mean, I can definitely vouch for that as an urban sketcher. It's, oh my goodness, it's such a different experience when you're painting or you're drawing from life, because you are really capturing the moment and you can't recreate that spontaneity when you're in the comfort of your own home or whatever, in your studio, and you're painting from a photo. Like, it's just so different. I mean, there's no way for me to explain like the 3D-ness of painting in real life. You know, even when I was doing this, like, obviously I was painting from inside, it still felt like I was almost painting from a photo, because I wasn't immersed in the scene. I was kind of seeing it from a distance. I personally agree with Marco in terms of it being really important to maintain a traditional medium, as it helps you to think in a different way. You know, like I said, be more spontaneous and free, mainly because you don't have Control Z. I mean, it actually does make a really big difference, because you have to learn how to let go and go with the flow, and also learn to work with your mistakes, especially if you're using paint or if you're using pen. There's no way you can kind of undo that. And I think there's almost a freedom in that, you know, if you're using a permanent medium, you kind of just have to go along with it, and you don't have the time or the luxury of kind of reworking it. So yeah, it's almost like you're kind of like saving time, because you're not worrying about how to recreate the problem, how to recreate the painting. You're just learning to work with the problem. And to be honest, half the time the mistakes actually really add a lot of character to the work. In general, I find myself to be a lot more creative when I'm working traditionally anyway. I think that's kind of like a general thing that a lot of people find. And even just to get away from a screen, it's just like so nice to do analog work. So I'd recommend this to literally anyone and everyone. I always found it, like, especially when I was like really concerned about my Instagram a couple of years ago, even last year, I was always worried, like, oh, should I do analog, should I do digital? Because on Instagram, it's really important that you keep an aesthetic, right? And so in my head, for some reason, because I was really obsessed with getting followers at that time, thankfully I'm not so obsessed with that idea anymore. But at the time I was wondering, like, oh, should I keep my art analog? Should I keep it digital? And eventually I just decided to keep everything digital on my Instagram, so I could, quote unquote, maintain this aesthetic, so that people would, you know what to expect from my Instagram, so they'd be more likely to follow me. But I mean, at the end of the day, digital artists, especially if you're a digital artist, you should try and definitely do analog. I mean, there's no rule that says the vice versa, you know, analog doesn't have to do digital, but at least if you're doing digital, like, it's almost imperative that you do analog work, just because you can understand your digital artwork better as well. So anyway, the point is, I'm really thankful that I've gone back to both mediums, because it's not supposed to be mutually exclusive. Like, they kind of go hand in hand, and there's just so much joy in using traditional mediums. Like, it's just, oh my goodness, I can't even explain it in words. Like, you can't explain it in words. It's literally like, you have to try it for yourself in order to understand, because I think that it's the tactility of like the mediums which really kind of, maybe it triggers something in your brain. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of psychological explanation for it. I didn't end up liking this piece. I mean, to be honest, I didn't really end up liking any of the pieces, but the important thing is I was happy actually doing the process, and because I only gave myself around 15 minutes to do it, I didn't stress too much about it. And I think that's why it's so good to do spontaneous stuff, because I mean, you don't really have time to stress, you know. And as Tiffany says, you learn a lot more from failures. Also, Marco says this as well in his videos. In fact, revisiting this concept of failing forward, it really just helps you to get over your mistakes a lot quicker when you can kind of just accept that, okay, this didn't work, but that's okay. I mean, it can only get better from here, right? And of course, like, I can just go back and revisit this piece and add in the extra details if or when I want to. Alright, the second piece was an urban sketch. I did this in the same morning, so it was straight after I did the watercolor. And the reason I wanted to try with pen is because I was kind of frustrated that I couldn't capture all the details properly with the watercolor. But then, ironically, I ran into the opposite problem with watercolor, which was that I had to capture all of the details in pen. And the problem with a view that I have is that there is just too much visual information to capture with line work in such a short amount of time, because, you know, if you think about it, there's like the metro, and then there's the all of the background, you know, like there's the buildings and the trees, and you have tall buildings and small buildings, and there's a mosque, and there's, you know, there's all kinds of different things, and there's cars, and it's just way too much information. And the point of using paint is that you can kind of just abstract those shapes with the paint strokes, but with pen it's kind of hard to do that. So because of lack of time, I kind of just did the lazy approach, where I did some lines here, some lines there, and just tried to make the line work of the foreground thicker to emphasize that it's at the front, and kind of just add random lines in the background to kind of represent, I mean, whatever, like trees or buildings or whatever. Then once I'd finished the line work sketch, I realized that the scene was just quite flat. I mean, again, with a scene like this, I think it's really difficult to do in line work because the emphasis of the scene was the light and the shadow. So I had to pull in some colors in order to kind of give that illusion and that impression. So I decided to use watercolor sticks by Winsor & Newton, which I picked up at the art supply store. I was quite intrigued by them. I used Payne's Grey, a green whose name I unfortunately ripped off. I think it was like Viridian Green or something, or Phthalo Green. And then I also used Prussian Blue. And this really helped bring the piece to life a bit more. I think the problem when urban sketching these kinds of detailed pieces is you either need to go hard or go home, in the sense that you can't really half-heartedly draw the pieces I did. I mean, you can, obviously, but it's just not gonna have the same visual impact. By the way, if you can hear like noises in the background, this is what happens when you live in an apartment block. It's been so difficult trying to find a time to record and it's like quiet. I think I'll just need to like move my recording times to early in the morning, because like throughout the day it's just not working. I mean, you can probably still hear it in the background. Okay, as promised, I'm recording this on a different day. Actually, it's very early in the morning. It's like 6 a.m. so I'm just going to continue from where I left off. Unfortunately, the painting part of the sketch didn't actually record for some reason, so yeah, I mean, you'll just see me colouring in and then that's about it. But I do have the next clip, which is for Gouache. I really wanted to talk back to the idea of failure, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I think the idea of failure being bad is something that's been instilled into us since school. You know, when you get an F grade, and I mean, especially if you're from a certain ethnic background, or if your parents are kind of strict, then a certain grade below is just a failure anyway. And personally, I have many qualms with the education system, but I mean, this is just one of them. In fact, as I said to a friend lately, in my teens, I was learning, but in my 20s, I'm unlearning. And so many things that I've unlearned, but I'm also relearning, and especially like in terms of art as well. I mean, digital art is really something that I'm trying to be a bit more diligent about. So I'm kind of like going back to fundamentals, which is why I'm watching a lot of Makabuchi videos. I'm watching a lot of Tiffany videos. And I'm learning that learning can actually be fun. Unfortunately, you know, as a student, whether it was in school, whether it was in university, I was really, all I cared about was the grades, and that was all I was working towards. I wasn't really enjoying the process of learning, and I didn't know what it meant to enjoy the process of learning, because my
ability to learn was just purely overshadowed by the fact that I needed to get that grade, and I was so obsessed with it. I was like, it was anxiety driven by the grade, you know, because if we didn't get the grade, then we wouldn't move forward to the next level. And that's how the system works, and that's a very unfortunate thing, because you know, it's just not, in my opinion, an appropriate way of learning, at least for me, because it did not work for me, because I did not purely enjoy what I was learning. As a child, or as a teenager, so as a young person growing up, you should really learn how to enjoy the process, because again, like I said, we're just so focused on results. And art, a lot of the time, is about the process, and it's through refining that process, enjoying that process, that you get a result that you're happy with and that is good, you know? Before I wanted to just jump to the solution straight away, I mean, again, that was something, whether it was in terms of art or in terms of schoolwork, and I was just satisfied, you know, if I got a good result, or if I got a good painting for Instagram, I was satisfied, and that's it. I didn't do any art for the rest of the day. And this is until as recently as last year, you know? So it's a shame that I've had to become an adult and leave the education system in order to actually understand learning and like why it's good. But yeah, I mean, if there are any students who are listening, or, you know, anyone in school or whatever, just enjoy it. Like, you really need to learn how to enjoy the process, and it's really difficult, I can understand, because you may be so pressured to get a certain grade, but in amongst all of that, you should really kind of pursue the things that you want to learn, and you know, figure out what it is that you enjoy learning, and also do subjects in school that you enjoy if you have the ability to choose. I remember I didn't choose art for my A-levels, because I thought, well, first of all, my parents discouraged me because they didn't think it was useful, and I mean, I also didn't think it would be useful. I mean, I wanted to do it, but also there was a lot of work involved, which is, you know, understandable now, because like, I'm doing all of that work. I'm trying to make time to do all of that work. So definitely, like, I mean, I'm not the kind of person who lives with regrets. I don't believe in regrets, but if there was one thing, like, I would go back and tell myself to go to art A-levels. I did it at GCSE, and I somehow like managed to scrape an A grade. I don't know how, to be fair. Like, I literally just did the minimum work to get to a certain level. I was hardworking, that's granted, but again, like, I was driven by the grade, not because I loved art so much. Loving art kind of came secondary. And I guess that's what put me off doing A-level art, because it was just a lot of work. But now I'm thinking back on it now, I realise that work is necessary to become a good artist. Like, that's the point of art. Art is just a lot of repetition. And I would have learned so much if I'd done art A-level. Anyway, this isn't a video talking about my regrets. Oh my goodness. But anyways, I hesitated a little when I thought about having to put these paintings on the internet for the world to see. But you know what? The fact that they are quote unquote bad is exactly why I should put them out, because I mean, that's another thing, that's another facet, I suppose, of failure, because social media and the internet has just conditioned us into thinking that all artwork that people make is pretty and aesthetic and it looks good, you know, for the gram, for the internet, for whatever, just for the aesthetic. And what we don't realize is that whenever we're learning, or whenever we make something in our initial stages, it's never pretty, it never looks good. And the beginners have just as much of a right to show their work as the experts. And if anything, it gives hope to other people, you know, it defies the unrealistic expectations made by the people that we follow online who have perfect images. And this doesn't just go for art, it goes for everything in life. And to be honest, it just grounds us, I feel like, back to reality, where we see that other people make mistakes like us, and, you know, we don't feel bad when we make quote unquote subpar work. I mean, this is a very deep topic that I'm going into for this video, I suppose, but I feel like everything could just be turned into social commentary, or maybe I just turn everything into social commentary. So I did this on a different day. I decided to sit out in my balcony, but ironically I ran into the same problem as I did with watercolor, mainly because I used the gouache with too much water. Now, if you don't know what gouache is, it's basically kind of like a happy medium between acrylic and watercolor. So you have this kind of opaque watercolor medium, so you can use it thick like acrylic, or you can use it watery like watercolor. And that's kind of how I used it, because I'm kind of a cheapskate, so I didn't want to waste too much paint. But in hindsight, I probably should have used a lot more paint. So the colours that I used were the primary colours of lemon yellow, crimson red, and Prussian blue. And I basically just used these and mixed them up to make the shadows and greens and whatever else I needed. As I was doing the gouache, I kind of knew a bit more about what I was getting myself into because I'd already done the watercolor. So I didn't use as much water on the paper. I tried to be sparing with it, but it still ended up being too much. And anyway, because I had the experience of doing the watercolor, I had a much less higher expectation than I had before, because I really didn't capture the previous watercolor piece. And to be honest, I was able to just enjoy it a lot more. I was sitting out on my balcony, it was nice, it was in the morning. So I was able to just enjoy the process and kind of understand what was happening with the process, rather than create some like beautiful masterpiece that, you know, to be honest, will only come through time and practice. And I think in hindsight, if I really want to do like urban painting on location, I'll need to practice first using watercolor and gouache in my studio or in my room. I don't really have a studio, but in my room at home, because then I'll have the confidence that I know what I'm doing in terms of like mixing colors and the water to paint ratio and things like that. So yeah, at least now I know that like, okay, this is something that I have to practice, and just, yeah, like I'll just need to practice it first when I don't have the constraints of, you know, the pressure of having to create a painting in 15 minutes or being on location or whatever. On the note of sketchbooks, I think it's also super important to know that your sketchbook does not have to look pretty by any means. The sketchbook is kind of a mess because there's a lot of paint that's been used, and ink as well. I've tried to use this sketchbook for Inktober, which is a whole other thing, by the way. I completely failed with Inktober. It's fine as well. Anyways, your sketchbook doesn't have to look pretty. It doesn't have to like follow an aesthetic. I mean, like I said, I'm also doing Inktober in the sketchbook, so it's like some pages of ink, some pages of paint. But you know what, I'm just like, who cares, you know? Like, this sketchbook is a place for me to make mistakes, try things, be wild, be crazy, be free, and not let my subconscious tell me that I need an aesthetic looking sketchbook. Because honestly, if that's my aim, it's kind of like the whole grades thing. If that's my aim, for me, right? Like, I'm talking about myself personally, maybe it works for other people, but for me, if my aim is to make an aesthetic looking sketchbook, I'm not going to learn anything. I'm not going to make mistakes. I'm literally never going to make anything in my sketchbook, because nothing I make is aesthetic. And that's kind of my life philosophy. I'm not an aesthetic person. And I've kind of just accepted that, because it's really ironic, because social media really has created standards for everything. You know, whether it's fashion, whether it's a certain body type, whether it's a certain face type or makeup type. And also in this context, I'm talking in a certain type, art type. You know, our art has to look a certain way, and it's going back to the grades. You know, you have to do a certain kind of thing in order to get the grade, you know, or you have to write a certain type of writing, or you have to answer the questions in a certain type of way in order to get the grade. It's all the same. Like, we are all trying to, or we're all forced to meet the standard. And once you kind of, you know, break free from all those systems, whether it's social media, whether it's the school system, whether it's anything else, you kind of realize we don't fit into this cookie cutter mold. We can't all make the same kinds of artwork. We can't all make, you know, aesthetic sketchbooks, right? I don't even know where I'm going with these. Like, I'm just trying to I'm trying to fill the time, basically. Yeah, it's what it is, to be honest. In fact, the first video that I posted on this channel this year is about being an aesthetic, and why it's important. And actually, even though it's a very short video, I'm actually quite happy with that video. And it's quite funny because I edited that video purely on my phone through Adobe Rush, which is like the phone version of Premiere Pro. So I'd advise you check that out, actually. It's on the popular uploads on my channel, which is quite funny because I didn't put a lot of effort into making that video. Let me know if you enjoy this kind of format, if you enjoy me speaking on random stuff. It's not random, it's all kind of connected and linked, I think, but I do ramble quite a bit. Though to be fair, this style of video means that I can ramble. Because my channel is still pretty small, I enjoy experimenting and trying new video formats to see what I enjoy making and what people enjoy watching. Ironically, there is a very big disparity because the videos that I put more effort into, like my podcast videos, or there's a few other videos that I've made, they are the less appreciated videos, which is a shame because, you know, I hope I can find a happy balance. In fact, I've been watching a lot of video essays about cinema, which is just like, they are so inspiring. And like when I watch those kind of stuff, like there's this guy called, I think his name's Thomas Field. His channel is like, oh my god, amazing. Like when he explains stuff, I'm like, whoa, mind blown. Like, you know, there's just so much stuff in cinema that I just don't think about as a normal audience member. I don't think about. But then when he explains it, like why editing is bad, or what makes editing good, or what makes, I don't know, screenwriting good, I'm like, I don't even know what screenwriting is, but you explain it to me and I'm like, whoa, this is so cool. And it's really nice because when you start to look at other creative disciplines, even if you're not gonna do it, it's really interesting because there's so much overlap. I mean, even now I'm reading a book called Borges, I think his name is Borges and Me by Jay Perini, who's also a writer, and Borges was a famous Argentinian writer, I believe. So it's kind of like an autobiography of Jay Perini, who as a young adult, when he was studying for his master's, or his thesis actually, he kind of took Borges around on a tour in Scotland or something like that. I've not read, I'm still in the beginning stages, but basically Jay Perini, he's a writer, and at the time he was trying to break into poetry. And it's really fascinating when I was reading the book because it kind of talks about creative process a bit and stuff like that. So it's really, you know, when I'm reading about poetry, when I'm watching videos about cinema, and also I'm making my own YouTube videos and I'm watching and learning things about art, everything overlaps. You know, the creative process is all the same everywhere. It's just the medium that we use to execute the creative process is different. But it's fascinating when you read creative processes about other people because it really, really feeds into your own process. Anyway, oh my goodness, I've rambled so much. Going back to the point of cinema video essays, I really enjoyed watching them, and it really inspired me to create something. I have no idea what, because I'm obviously not a cinema expert, but there are certain dramas or movies that I've watched that I feel are really underappreciated, and when I googled them, there are literally zero video essays about them. There are like fan music videos and stuff, but I wanted to kind of create my own version of it, even though I know that they're going to be the kind of videos that are not popular on this channel. The kind of videos that are popular on this channel are these kinds of like urban sketching videos, which is not exactly something that I want to pigeonhole myself into, because like I said, I love a lot of different types of things, and I really want that to reflect on my channel, and I want to be kind of known or appreciated for making like different kinds of videos. And I feel like it's possible, you know, like there are all kinds of YouTubers, like for example Ali Abdaal. You know, he was a doctor. He started off his channel with doctory stuff and doctor student stuff, medical student stuff, and now he's like productivity and like he does all kinds of things. I really want to try stuff out, and I don't know what yet, but at least I want to bring some light into, like I said, the movies or dramas that I find super underrated, that I think people would appreciate, and bring my own spin on it. And I think it's going to be really interesting because I'll have to figure out what I appreciate about those videos, and not videos, what I appreciate about those series or movies, which I never really think about actually. So I'm gonna see what happens and how it goes. But I've talked too much. I hope I've not extended my talking, but I hope you liked the video. and that you took something from it, that you enjoyed my rambling, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Bye!